An intro to facilitation today. My name is Meridith. I'm part of a group called the Young Producers. We're supported by City Arts in Nottingham, and this event is part of our November takeover. The November takeover is something we do every year, and if you're familiar with us, you might have been to one in the past. We do a whole load of different events at City Arts and around. We've done exhibitions, we've done live performance events, we've done skill shares and things like that. Obviously, we've been quite limited this year, but we still wanted to be able to do something. So we've decided to bring everything online, and we've been doing Instagram at Young Producers. We've had Day in the Life, where we've had a chance to meet some of our team members. We've been doing other things, like we had a showcase on Saturday night, which some of you might have attended. It was pretty cool. We had a lot of comedy, a lot of poetry, and a DJ. And then yesterday we had a drawing club where we shared with you some drawing tips, and we had a Q&A from one of our newest young producer members at Darlington, and a video of his hyper-realistic drawing, which was quite fun. And then we've got this facilitation workshop with me now, and directly after this at 8 o'clock, we're going to have an introduction to photography with Mary, another one of our young producers. So we really have tried to do a fun program for you this year. And it was all inspired by the idea of retraining. We titled it Refrain, Retrain, Remain, and it was inspired by the idea that if we do have to retrain as creatives, why not do it within the creative industry? Why not learn from each other and expand our creative toolbox in what we're able to do? And that's why I had the idea to share with you a facilitation workshop. It's kind of how you can turn your passion and your skill into something that's teachable that you can share with people. My background is that I've worked in schools, I've worked in hospitals, in care homes, in community settings, in arts organisations, and I've done lots of different workshops, not necessarily in just one art form. And that's where I've gained my experience as a facilitator. So I'm hoping to just share with you a few kind of tips on how we do that. And how you can do it too. This is great for beginners, but if you are already a teacher or facilitator, this might just provide you kind of an alternative, some new ideas. I'm not sure. I'd like to start by just talking about what facilitation means and what a facilitator is. So if you like, if you can post on the comments and let me know what kind of person a facilitator is, we're going to add to our list here. You can see I have my face up in the corner, but I didn't want you to just look at my face the whole time, so we're going to be making some notes here and some kind of mind mapping together. So a facilitator that we're all probably quite familiar with is teachers. Teachers are facilitators. They facilitate learning. I have a quote here that I quite like. It's the definition of a facilitator is a person or thing that makes an action or process easy or easier. I think the word facilitate comes from the French word facile, which means easy. So basically to make something easy, to enable something to happen. And that's really what I aim to do with my kind of facilitation. Teachers are definitely facilitators. A true educator acts as a facilitator of learning is one of my favorite quotes. But there are also trainers, and that could be like a personal trainer of any kind with exercise. Coordinators are facilitators. That's any kind of coordinators. You might kind of be familiar with care home activity coordinators, sometimes called lifestyle coordinators. We have a comment that's saying someone who oils the wheels in a group is a facilitator. Yeah, absolutely. So kind of like a mentor or a group leader, meeting leader. I'm going to put group leader. And we have another comment saying group moderator. Yeah, fantastic. Moderators are also facilitators. Group moderator. You could also be a facilitator if you are a youth worker. You're probably doing a lot of different things that fall into the umbrella of facilitation if you're a youth worker. If you run a meeting, if you kind of lead a workshop, if you host a panel discussion, you are a facilitator. Another comment here, we've got public programming. Yes, absolutely. That's facilitation. It can be working with anybody. Oh, I'm squeezing my letters in here very much. Please keep the comments coming, they're very, very helpful. Something that I sometimes forget is therapists, occupational therapists, or just whatever kind of therapist. They are facilitators of kind of positive health and well-being, and they take you through a journey. Another one here says TA, is that teaching assistant? Absolutely, they are facilitators. Often teach in-depth facilitator for a person that has a different kind of learning maybe and needs that extra little bit of attention. So they are really, really valuable as facilitators, assisting the teacher and being able to focus on whichever student or participant requires that, because we all learn in different ways. Some of us are very visual learners like me, which is why I've tried to kind of get this on here for you. Hopefully you can make some notes of your own if you want, but this is a little bit more interesting than just me talking. Yeah, so there's all different kinds of facilitator. If you are an artist or creative person that shares your skills with people, you're a facilitator. Coach, yes, absolutely, a coach is a good one. Somebody that leads a team, brings people together. Parent, yeah, I love that. Parents are facilitators in all different aspects of life. You guide that person through life. Absolutely, parents are facilitators. Thank you so much for this. This is really, really good. Okay. We can add to that list later if people come up with some more ideas. That'd be fantastic. For now, we're going to leave it here, and we're going to move on to how to approach facilitation, especially if you've never done it before. Please don't be intimidated by my long sort of list, but this is how I kind of look at it. There are kind of different steps you have to go through. You need to do your planning, and then facilitation. Usually, you can break up a session into different parts, and I tend to break it up into a warm-up, first activity, bit of a comfort break, second activity, and then a cool down / feedback opportunity. It really depends on what you're doing, whether you're going to be able to have all these three kind of broken up or whether you just squish it into one. Depends on the time you've got, people you're working with, all that kind of thing. We're going to kind of talk about these each in more detail and then come back and add to our lists here. So let's start on the planning. There are certain things you need to know when you're planning a workshop. One of them is who you're working with. So you need to know things like, what age are these people? Are they from a school? Are they a group of professionals and you're doing kind of like team building? What are their capabilities? Kind of, are they beginners? Are they experts? What are they interested in? Is this a social group that you're facilitating something for? Kind of, what are their kind of specific interests? Oh, I hope I don't spell anything wrong here. That could be quite embarrassing. And you need to know what you're doing. What is it that you're asked to be doing? You may be doing this kind of session as a response to a brief or something that's been put out there, or you may have planned it yourself. But you need to know exactly what the content of the session is going to be. So what is it? Is it an art form? Is it something to do with health and lifestyle? I don't imagine anybody would go into a session not knowing what to do, but this is just your kind of whole list. Also, where is this going to happen? A lot of us are doing sessions online right now. So is this something that's virtual? You're going to have to think a lot about how to adapt your usual way of working if you're having to do things virtually. I can go into a little bit more detail on that later. What facilities do you have available to you? Is it somewhere you go in? Do you have the facility to hook things up? Do you have the facility to do a projection? Are you going to be able to wash up paint if you need to? What's there? What's available to you? Where is it going to be? When do you have access to that building? If you can, visit the place before you do your first session so you kind of know exactly what's happening. We also need to know why. What's the aim of that session? I'm just going to very quickly plug that in so I don't lose you all. So why is very, very important. What's the aim? What do these people want to learn? What do you want to teach them? What's the end goal here? Are you trying to show them a brand new art form? In which case you might not be able to get everything done in one session. You might have to break it up and plan a series of sessions or a longer project. Have they asked for it? Have you planned it? What's the intention here? Is there a final product that you need to be having in your mind? You know, is this something that they're wanting to make a publication at the end of it, or is this just a team building exercise, in which case you'll have to try and tailor your session to be including a lot of kind of bonding activities and things like that. It's really gonna, the content's really gonna depend on the aim. When is this happening? Do you have any choice in when this happens? If you do, think about, if it's online, make sure it's going to be out of working times. Think about which kind of days of the weeks or times of day are going to be better for getting participation. Time, day. Is it a certain time of year, in which case maybe you can tailor it to be seasonally appropriate? You know, maybe somebody wants to learn something about using oil pastels and it's Halloween. Maybe you're going to try and get some pumpkins in there. I don't know, things to think about. And then how you're going to do this depends, again, entirely on what you're doing, what your specialty is. You need to make sure you have the materials necessary, maybe even extra materials in case you run out. Do you have kind of all the equipment that you need? This could be electrical equipment, projectors, things like that. Do you have instructional sheets to give out? Are you going to need to kind of hand out individual printed diagrams to help people understand what they're being asked to do? You really need to think about all these separate things before you even come to your session. So these are things to remember. So we'll go back to our planning sheet and we'll just kind of have a little list of who, what, when, where, and why. And how. So this one is easy to remember because it's kind of all the W's and then how at the end. This is probably something that you've come across before when you're trying to plan things. So moving into warm-up activities, I love doing warm-up activities, and I think they're really, really important. Your warm-up is important because it's the beginning of your session. You need to get things started off as you mean to go on. There are kind of two types of warm-up as I see it. You can either have icebreakers or energy makers. I don't know if this is a technical term for it, but this is how I remember. And which one you're going to choose depends on the group that you're working with. So if you have a group that are new to each other, that have never met before, you're going to probably be doing an icebreaker to begin with. If this is a group that you have met before and that all know each other, maybe try and choose something that's a bit of an energy maker so that you can just sort of get them all in the same headspace and all kind of pumped up. You also might want to do energy makers for workshops or sessions that are quite kind of like physical and high activity, high energy, because this is going to give you, spell energy correctly, this is going to give you momentum that you can use to launch into your first activity. So energy makers are for sessions you plan that require a lot of high energy. Maybe they're kind of drama sessions or acting sessions. People that already know each other is usually when you're going to use your energy maker. Okay, people who know each other. You might do something that's a combination of the two. A lot of the time when I work with young people, I do things that are a combination of the two because I want them to be able to start forming bonds and building up enough confidence to participate in the session, but I also need to generate a certain amount of energy to get everybody hyped up for what we're about to do. So icebreakers, new people. Even if they already know each other and you don't know them, consider doing an icebreaker so that you can get to know them. Because the more you know who you're working with, the more effectively you can facilitate whatever it is you need to do. Because you'll know kind of what their capabilities are, what their confidence levels are, and everything like that. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So icebreakers, we could do, I have a kind of list here. Exquisite corpse is one that I like to use. Exquisite corpse can be just a generic kind of warm-up activity, or it can also be an icebreaker. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to do it for you now. You may have already heard of it. It's one where everybody gets a piece of paper and they have to draw different sections. So you might have one person draw the head, and then you'll pass it on to somebody else, and they're going to draw the other part of the body. So you always want to make sure you include the little neck for them. I'm just going to give you a really quick example. Okay, so I'm going to start my head with an alien. They do this in secret. They don't show each other what they're doing. We're going to have a little alien. And then for the next person, they fold this paper over, leaving the neck visible. I'll just move this out of the way temporarily. Leaving the neck visible, and then the next person can fill in the next part of the drawing. So I'm going to do arms all the way down to the hips. Okay, so let's do, I don't know, some kind of little squiggly tentacles or something. This is a bit of a silly one. It is fun to do kind of silly ones because it means that people are going to let go of some of their insecurities maybe and kind of just get into it. Encourage them to think about different characters, encourage them to think about different animals or whatever. We're going to have a little belly button there, and I think we don't want it to be naked, so let's do a little crop top, little stripy crop top. There we go. And then all the way down to the hips. Next person needs to then fold this over again and pass it along. It's very important that you keep passing it along. What I like about this is that it means that in the end, there'll be a drawing that's been drawn on by lots of different people. So I'm just going to go straight ahead and go from the hips down to the feet. You can break it up more if you want and make sure that more people have a chance to contribute to the one drawing. Let's put some little jeans on. It's funny when you kind of start drawing in front of somebody or on live stream, you kind of lose the ability to draw how you usually do. Okay, so there we go, we've got that. And then what I like to do is I like them to put their name on it and pass it to the next person. And then there's a few different ways you can now turn this into an icebreaker. So everybody can open up their drawings and see what wacky, crazy kind of characters they've got. And then what I like to do is pass this to the next person and have them introduce me. So for example, I'd pass this along and they'd have this brand new drawing that they haven't even kind of drawn anything on, and they'd have this person and they can say, they can introduce the person that's given it to them. They can say, hey, this is Meridith. She's a blue-headed alien with tentacles for arms and really cool green boots. And then everybody can go around in a circle and introduce the person next to them. If you kind of gauge that your group isn't very confident, maybe they want to introduce themselves. I do like using this for children and young people because it can be a little intimidating with a new group to do the whole, this is who I am, this is how old I am and what I do. So this is just a fun way to do that easily for them, get everybody's names out and kind of get everybody being a bit silly and get everybody drawing. If you're doing a creative workshop, this is a really nice one to start with. Okay, so let's get our paper back here and let's add exquisite corpse. I would absolutely love it if any of you had suggestions on different icebreakers that I could add to my list. So please go ahead and comment if you want. So exquisite corpse. Also, if anybody knows the name for exquisite corpse that isn't this name, there's two names for it, please let me know because I sometimes forget. So we can do exquisite corpse. You can always also do the story game. I like the story game a lot. You can either give everybody 1 word, 2 word or 3 words, and you go around in a circle and make a story out of everybody's words. So somebody might say once upon a time, next person will say there lived a, next person bright green snail, and you just kind of go on like that. Try and get them to do it quickly if they can, so that they're not thinking too much about it, and you'll get some really wacky stories out of it and hopefully make people laugh. If you can make people laugh at the beginning of your session, that is awesome. That's kind of letting them let their guard down and kind of open up to you a bit. So let's do story game. That can be an icebreaker or an energy maker. There's also one that I like to do in a care home I work at, where we throw a ball around and the ball has different colours on, and written on the different colours are questions. So you pick a colour, throw it to somebody across the circle, and they pick it up and answer the question on there. And that could be a question like, What was your first pet called? Where did you go to school? What's your favourite food? What's your favourite colour? Easy questions like that are easy to answer for people. Another one that I like, which is a bit of an icebreaker and an energy maker, is sketch your neighbour. So the story game you can do virtually, because you can just give everybody a list of who goes after each other, and they can do it on Zoom or wherever. Sketch your neighbour you can do virtually or in person. And what I like to do for sketch your neighbour is to give them a piece of paper, have a bag full of materials in. Somebody said portrait game. Yeah, I think you're talking about the same thing as me. I have like a lucky dip bag, and I put loads of different colours and materials in, and then I get them to pick it out, and they have like a random colour. And then they sketch their neighbour, and I give them a minute to do it. And sometimes you give them a limit, like don't look at your paper the entire time that you're drawing, or don't take your pen off the paper the entire time you're drawing, or try and draw just one facial feature, or give them less time. Okay, we have another suggestion: making fortune tellers with questions written inside, etc. Yeah, that's a really, really good one, because that's a little creative activity they can do with their hands, and then they kind of can go off and do it with each other. And that's a really nice one, and it's one that you can let them do whilst you continue setting something up, maybe, which is really cool. Thank you for that suggestion. I'm going to give you a quick example of the portrait game. I'm going to draw myself, because I can see myself in a little window here. So I'm not going to look at the paper, I'm going to look just over here. And my face is really small, so this is going to be difficult. If anybody wants to time me, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm just going to count to 60 in my head. This one I love. It makes everybody laugh. I did this once for a team building, and I don't know how the people in the building next to us didn't complain, because they were laughing so much. I've done my piercing too big, I think. They were laughing so much at what they'd created. Some of them were really, really pleased with what they'd done. Some of them were kind of, oh, I can't believe I've done this before. I can't believe I've never done this before. I shouldn't have tried to do the hair. Why have I tried to do the hair? And some of them really didn't like what they'd done, even though I thought it was quite interesting. Okay, that's about a minute. Oh, gosh. So you see, you have a kind of weird thing, and you can sign it, or you can put that person's name on and give it to them as a little keepsake of the activity. It's really nice to have that. Somebody here has commented continuous line drawing. Yes, that is one of the ways that you can do the portraits to sketch your neighbour, continuous line drawing. That's fantastic. We're going to put this to the floor. I'll frame it later, maybe. Other energy makers, try and do, if you can, if you're in person, try and do something that gets them up and about. If you are a facilitator that needs to get people to do a drama workshop, or you're kind of trying to teach them acting tips, try and get something that really, really is high energy, something that even gets them to run across the room. We used to play a game when I was little where you had starboard, port, and then the other two, I can't remember, and somebody would shout it and you would just run. You would just run and go to different sides of the room. Alma from City Arts actually taught me the Sun and Moon game, which is a nice one, which is an energy breaker and an ice maker, where you have kind of two opposites and you assign them to each side or corner of the room, and people have to run back and forth. So you might say, do you prefer pizza or ice cream? And they have to make a decision and they have to run to their side. Or kind of, do you prefer daytime or nighttime? And they got to run. And that gets them to get to know each other and also move around the room and create a little bit of energy. This is something you could also do virtually if you wanted. You could get people to make little kind of paddles, signs that they can hold up that are double-sided. And it might be, you might have colours, so you might have red or green or A or B or whatever. And you can ask the question and people can hold up the colour that, whichever you assign the answers to the different colours, and they can hold it up. That's just an idea of how you can kind of change things to be that way, because not everybody has access to all the online things that you can do for virtual facilitation. You know, like there's websites you can use where people type in an answer and it comes up. Not everybody knows how to use those. I don't use those very often because of the kind of people that I work with. So I try and think of ways where they're just looking at one screen and just kind of doing something from one screen. So those are kind of different ways to do warm-ups, icebreakers. You probably know some yourself, like the 2 truths and a lie thing, where you everybody tells 2 truths and 1 lie about themselves, and people around have to guess which one's which. That's a fun game to do. So yeah, let's go back to our main page and explain what we've done in our warm-up. So, icebreaker, energy maker. Obviously, I'm just giving you a few examples of the kind of things that you can do. And once again, it does depend entirely on what you are doing yourself. So, for the first activity, I do tend to split my sessions up like this because I'll have at least a couple hours to do it. So that means that I have time to do a little warm-up, jump into the first activity, and then have a comfort break. If you don't, if you've got an hour with somebody, you just do 1 activity, warm up, 1 activity, kind of cool down. But yeah, for your first activity, it really depends what your specialty is. If anybody has a specialty that they are wanting to turn into a facilitation opportunity, please comment and I'll try and respond to that and give you some ideas. But yeah, it really, really depends on what you're doing. I'm going to give you an example of one that I've done in the past, which is bookbinding. So when I've done bookbinding, I've tried to split it up into your little warm-up, and then the first activity being exploring different kinds of bookbinding, kind of figuring out what bookbinding is, allowing them to flick through some different types of books and different ways of binding books, really delve into the art form that I'm trying to introduce to them, and then have kind of a little bit of an easier introduction where it's just folding rather than bookbinding. You can sometimes do sewing. So I would always introduce the more accessible form of doing something within the first activity and letting them get familiar with it. Your first activity is also an opportunity for you to get people to work individually. So if you do have space to do this kind of setup, you could use this first activity time to get them working on their own on something, building up their confidence with it a bit. And then after your comfort break, you can bring them all together and have them work as a team, or they can be making something themselves. And then as part of the second part, all those things they've made individually can come together and you can make it into a collaborative piece. That's also a really, really nice way to break up your session. Other ways to do it, if you are doing kind of more physical things, like I sometimes do exercise with the residents in the care home that I work at, and I will always start with one type of thing, like exercises that use their arms, songs that we play with, movements that use their arms, and then we'll move and do their legs afterwards. So we're kind of focusing on one bit and then another bit, you know, or you might kind of really, really structure the first bit, and then when everybody is kind of more into it, in your second bit, you can take suggestions, you can get them guiding and kind of deciding which way to go, which as a facilitator, I think is really, really important. You are helping somebody to achieve something or to do something new, and their input is absolutely valuable. And if you can get them to direct it at all, go with it. And that's another point. You do have to be flexible when you're facilitating. You have to be able to work with whichever people you're involved in and do what they want you to do, because you're providing a service for them, you're providing an experience for them, and you want them to be able to get something out of it. Okay, so for your first activity, you might kind of think about individual work, and exploration and discovery. If you're the kind of facilitator that's doing kind of community programming, or you're doing kind of, maybe you're facilitating a panel discussion, your first part is probably going to look quite different. It's probably going to look like a lot of introductions, a lot of explaining why everybody's here and who is here, and then coming into questions where you're getting audience participation. So yeah, please do let me know in the comments if there is an art form or subject that you are involved in, and I'll try and kind of give you some tips on how you could maybe turn that into facilitation. So comfort break. If you have time for a comfort break, I would advise that you do it. This is a time for people to go to the loo to get a drink, but also just to wind down a little bit and have a little bit of a chat with each other. If you're doing things virtually, comfort break is also important so that they can have a few minutes away from the screen, because we all know, I'm sure we all know right now, that screen fatigue is a real thing and we need to be mindful of it. So if you're doing something that's longer than an hour or so, consider getting in a comfort break, and make sure they can go and get refreshments, stretch their legs, whatever they need to do, away from screen. A small issue sometimes in having a break is that you might lose a little bit of that momentum that you've generated, and that's okay. If you think that's the case, just think about how you can start your second activity in a way that brings the energy back up if you need to. So yeah, so for our second activity, you might be thinking more about collaborative work. Getting people together. They've probably got a little bit more confidence by that point, so they'll be able to do some things with everybody else. Okay, and then what's also important is cool downs and feedback. When I say cool down, what I mean is kind of just, it's the reflection of the warm up. So at the beginning, we were getting everybody warmed up, we were getting everybody hyped up for what we're about to do. And once you've done all of that, you kind of need to bring people back down into the same kind of ground, into the same headspace, because you want to be able to gather feedback. As a facilitator, it's really, really important that you try and get feedback if you can, because you need to know what you're doing right or what you're not doing right. You have to be prepared for negative or constructive feedback, and you've got to welcome that, because at the end of the day, that's going to help you get better and be always improving. I'm always learning new things. I'm always doing things that I think, oh, I could improve on that next time. I could do that a little bit better if I did it this way. And that's a good thing. It's good to recognize where you can change, where you can alter things, especially if you're working with a new group. I've done a lot of things where it was coming into a place with people I had no idea about, and I planned something and I brought a plan B. Always important to have a plan B, and I've had to use it. I've had to use that because their capabilities were lower than I was expecting, and you know, I was there for a reason. They were paying me to be there, and they still deserve to get something out of it. So you have to be flexible and get that to happen. And then you have to do your kind of cool down afterwards. If you're doing a physical activity, your cool down is probably going to be a little bit physical as well. So if you did dancing, if you did running around the room, if you did kind of comedy or whatever, something that requires you to be talking a lot or moving around physically a lot, have a cool down that has some kind of physical movement. I like to use nice, gentle, slow music, and sometimes we'll do things where we tense the areas of our body. So we'll go from top down, we'll go tense your shoulders and let go. Bring your arms up and let go. Make a fist and let go. And you kind of work through that across their whole kind of body and let them cool down a little bit. Music, I think, is really, really fantastic to include in your session if you can, because you can have the nice chilled out kind of slow at the end, and then in the beginning, if you needed it, you could have a really upbeat one that gets people kind of in the mood for doing things. Not everybody likes background music, that's okay, but if your group is responsive to it, consider using it. I know this is not something you'll be able to do if you're doing things virtually. Like, for example, right now, I couldn't play you any music because you won't be able to hear my voice. But if you do have the opportunity to, consider making yourself a playlist for the different things that you're doing, if you can. And then you could also do games for the cool down, and they don't necessarily have to be related at all to the content of your session. If the main content of your session was making ceramics, you don't have to have a warm-up or a cool-down that's got anything to do with ceramics. It can just be a random game. The story game is nice for a cool-down because it brings everyone back down to earth and gets them talking all together. You could also just have a discussion, and if you are able to, try and record that discussion. Let everybody know, first of all, if you're going to record something, and then record the discussion that they're having and let that conversation develop naturally and see where it goes. And then try and get some feedback if you can. When I say feedback, I mean just literally about the thing that you've done. Some of you will also be familiar with filling in lots of forms, like monitoring forms, etc. And those are also important, but I would advise you do that at the beginning or even before you even get to the session. If your project is something that's been funded by somebody, it's likely that they're going to want you to do something like an impact report or give participation information on the different participants. You know, they're going to want to know where they were from, what ages they were, what gender they were, maybe what profession they were. I don't know. They're gonna want to know this information. And if you try and get that at the end of your session, you're kind of leaving them on a little bit of a, oh, I filled in loads of paperwork kind of note. So if you can get that done before you start, that's fantastic. And then just try and leave with the memories of the fun activity, because they're already going to have to stop for a second to do some feedback. There are lots of different ways to gather feedback. One way that I like is by doing, let's get our cool down page here so we can make some notes. If you're face-to-face with people, you can get them to put their feedback on a post-it note and add it to a post-it note wall. So you could make a little post-it note, I don't think I'm spelling that correctly. You could make a little presentation on the wall. I'm not sure what to call it, kind of a little space where you've got what did you learn today, or how did you feel about the session, or what was the difficulty level, and give them all post-its and get them to write it and stick it on. That's a little bit of an anonymous way of doing feedback, because they don't have to put their name on, they can just kind of stick the way they felt about it, and you can have a little bit of a discussion after that. And then if you want, you can get them to fill in forms. Forms are always good. Try and make sure that your form includes opportunities for qualitative feedback and quantitative feedback. So quantitative would be kind of your numbers and things. So maybe they how many people were there, and maybe they score from 1 to 10 or whatever, and these are just kind of numbers data. And qualitative means open-ended questions that you ask. So you could put a question on there that says, tell me your favorite thing about today, tell me the most difficult thing about today, and that forces your participants to write their own answer out. And it's really nice to get that qualitative feedback, because it's kind of a lot of detail from them for you, and you can use it in social media if you want. If you've got a really cool quote where somebody's really enjoyed it, you can put that on your website or wherever, and that's really, really nice feedback to help you show other people how your participants have enjoyed what you're doing. Cool down, let's put a few notes on here. So cool down, we'll have slow music, easy low energy games, low energy games. Yeah, fantastic. So feedbacks, forms if you can. If you are facilitating online, there are ways you can get people to do this online. You could have a feedback form available online. I honestly don't think that's something that people engage in a lot, because they've already spent time looking at the screen, paying attention to you. They're not that likely always to go and fill something in, especially if you're working with younger people or older people. That's not something that you can guarantee getting a result from. So think about ways you can do it on Zoom. Think about ways you can do it with a screen. You can get people to write down, if you say on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult was this? 10 being really difficult. They could write a number down, or they could just hold up this, and you could take a screenshot if you want. If you've told them in advance that you're going to be recording anything or taking screenshots, you could do that. You could get them all to do that, take screenshots. You could give them a traffic light system where they have an orange object, a red object, a green object, and at different points within your session you can say, is this okay, are we finding this difficult? And they might hold something up, and you can gauge right then and there how difficult they're finding it or how enjoyable they're finding it. And you can do that at the end as well. If you ask questions, you know, how would you do this again? Yes, I would. Or would you like me to do, or would you kind of consider, would you like this option in the future? And they might go, oh, I don't know, maybe. And this is just ways that you can get people to do feedback that's less pressure on them, less intimidating for them, because people do like giving anonymous feedback. So if make that opportunity available, especially if you don't know the group, or if you think it's a lower confidence group, if you're working with young people or people that are maybe, if you're working with vulnerable adults, it's going to be maybe a little difficult to gather feedback. So think of creative ways that you can get a little bit of feedback for yourself. Okay, yes, so traffic light system is good. Something I do really, really often if I'm doing an online thing is I just say thumbs up if you're doing okay, thumbs up when you finished, or thumbs down if you need more time or whatever. And these are really, really visual ways that people can show you how they're doing. Okay. Traffic light system. Does anybody have any cool downs that they use in their day-to-day teaching, mentoring, facilitation, anything like that that you'd like to share with us? I'd really, really welcome that. Okay. You can also do the describe in one word. So, and they can write that down and hold it up to the screen if they need to. So describe in one word how today's session was. Describe in one word what was your favorite thing. And if you want to, if you're going to be working with that group for a long time, that sort of thing is something you can do at the beginning, where you can change the questions up to be more like, what are you hoping to gain from today? What are your expectations for today's session? And see what you get from that, and then compare that to what they say at the end. We've got a suggestion in the comments that says breathing/meditating exercises to cool down and share how they feel. Yeah, that's really cool. There was actually, last time I went to anywhere that did meditation, it was an event by young producers, and it was another one of the young producers, I believe Ingrid, that's messaged here, that led us in a guided meditation afterwards. And I'd never had that before after an event, after a session, and that was really, really, really cool. I came away from it feeling very refreshed and very kind of like reflective on what had happened, and it gave me space to think about how everything had gone. And I then was a bit more receptive to be able to talk about what I enjoyed or what I would want differently. So that's a really, really good example. Thank you very, very much for sharing that. If anybody else has any more to share, please do let me know. But we've kind of gone through most of our things now. So let's finish up our notes on this page here. Cool down feedback. So we want to focus on low energy games, things that are really accessible. So if you're doing something like meditation, make sure it is accessible to people. Make sure that you know exactly what you're going to do, what you're going to say, and make it simple and easy, because this is not a point in time where you want people to have to do a lot of thinking or a lot of kind of heavy trying to understand something new. So low energy games, music, meditation even. Okay, so we have another wonderful comment here. I'm loving that people are commenting, so thank you so much for that. This is more from a teacher perspective, but I try to get the kids to evaluate their work by finishing sentences. Example, the title of this work is ... I made it using ... My favorite thing is ... Next time I could ... That's really, really good. I quite like that. I like the kind of filling in thing, because you have provided them most of the written thing. It's not intimidating. They just have to fill in words, and you're gathering different kinds of information and getting them to acknowledge what they've done. I think that's really nice as well, that they've acknowledged what they've done. I made a title, I did it using this, and that's fantastic. If you can leave your session with your participants feeling that they've achieved something, that's really, really cool. So in your cool down, try and reflect on what they've achieved. Reflect on their achievements, reflect on what they've done. Definitely ask them, is this something that's new? What did you learn that is new? And kind of try and get that from them, because it might leave them thinking, hey, this is really cool. I've managed to do something that I didn't know before. And that's fantastic for them. Another tip in general with facilitation is be complimentary, be encouraging. You do have to be high energy as a facilitator. You have to bring the energy, you have to bring the positivity and the enthusiasm, because your group might not have it. This might be something that's new to them or something they're trying to improve upon, and you really have to be the driving force that gets them to feel that they can do it. So if they do something well, tell them they've done it well. I really love the way you described that. I think this is a really cool thing that you've created. I love the colours that you've used. I love this technique that you've used. Maybe you can show us how to do that. You know, get them to be teaching, get them to be sharing their skills, push them in a gentle way that feels appropriate to expand on their capabilities and on their limits, because that means as a facilitator you're doing your job. You're making people do new things, do things that they didn't think that they could do, and really achieve things. So yeah, that's wonderful. If you have a long project, I want to just talk a little bit about how the end of it might look a little different. This is obviously a plan for a single kind of session. Usually that's an hour or a couple of hours or maybe even half a day. But if you have a project that spans over a few weeks or over a few months, make sure at the end you have an opportunity to celebrate what they've achieved and what they've done and what they've learned. See if you can invite other people to see it. Think about if the work that they've created or the work that they've done, if they've not created something, you could be recording the work that they've done. See if that can be shared with other people. See if you can make it into a video that can be shared online. Can it be an exhibition that tours around your local libraries? Can it be made into a publication that you can give out to your participants and their families to show pictures of what they've done, or anything? It really depends on what your specialty is. I realise that some of the things I'm saying are quite vague, but it's because it does depend on the context of what you're doing, and whether you're a teacher, whether you're a therapist, whether you're a personal trainer. These are just skills that I'm hoping will be transferable into whatever your specialty is. So yeah, if it's a long project, there is a lot of value in making space for celebration at the end. And obviously you've probably got more chance to get more in-depth feedback if it is a longer project. Yeah. So having said that, I would love some feedback from all of you. The easiest way for us to do feedback on something like a live stream is for you to just comment. So if you have comments on what you've enjoyed, I'd love for you to post it. If you have suggestions on what more you would like, please share that with me. If you want something that's kind of more in depth on just virtual facilitation, I'd be quite happy to think about that, to entertain that idea. So let me know what you enjoyed. Let me know what you might want to see in the future. I also welcome any comments about our November takeover as a whole, because we've all worked really hard for this, kind of remotely, where we are all in our homes or across the East Midlands, or even overseas. We actually have members now in Nigeria and Canada, which is really, really cool. So please share any feedback that you have with us on the comments here on Facebook or YouTube where you're watching it. Thank you all so much for joining me. Later this evening, in about 10 minutes, we are launching the video of the introduction to photography from one of our young producers, Mary. So definitely check that out. And once again, just thank you for joining me. Thanks for any of the other sessions that you've seen as part of our takeover this year. It's been a little bit of a challenge trying to do everything online and do all of our meetings online, but we've pulled together and I hope you've all enjoyed it. Check out our Facebook and Instagram. We're youngproducers_city_arts. And have a lovely evening, everybody. I hope this has been helpful. Take care of yourselves and we'll see you soon for something else. Bye-bye.